Welcome to the Freethinkers Living Sober Group's 15th edition of Varieties of Secular Experience, Navigating AA in a Secular Way. This workshop features an interview with Jeffrey Munn, author of Staying Sober Without God, and Joe C. from Rebellion Dogs Publishing. After that half-hour interview, Mr. Munn takes questions and comments from some of the 170 participants in the workshop. Due to some technical difficulties, the last few minutes of the workshop were not recorded. And now, here is Joe with Jeffrey Munn.
My name's Joe. I'm in recovery. You can call me an alcoholic, someone with substance use disorder, dipsomaniac, inebriant. I'm a proud member of AA, a happy customer, a member of Beyond Belief Agnostics and Freethinkers AA group, and a regular at, I feel like a regular anytime I'm in Cottonwood at the Freethinkers Living Sober. Welcome everybody to the Freethinkers Living Sober Group workshop on Varieties of Secular Experience, Navigating AA in a Secular Way. Today, we're going to be in conversation with Jeffrey Munn. So if you just fell off the turnip truck, you might want to know that Jeffrey Munn wrote Staying Sober Without God, a practical 12 steps to long-term recovery from alcoholism and addictions. At my secular 12-step group, we'll read anybody's writings on the 12 steps, but this particular book has been very popular there. So if you're new to this particular format, on the last Sunday of every month, we have a different speaker or panel sharing their own experience, strength, and hope for 30 to 45 minutes on some aspect of getting, staying, and living sober in AA the secular way. These workshops are recorded. The audio is recorded, that is, and we'll post them on our new Buzzsprout podcast page. Past workshops are on the YouTube channel. Check the chat. John or Kat will put all of the links in there for you. We'd like to thank Beyond Belief for hosting this Zoom meeting room. I'm a member of Beyond Belief, but one of the great things about being a group is you can do things in service, and we have a sort of 500-person account. We can because of all the people who come and all the people who contribute, and we're happy to sort of lend that out wherever and whenever it's needed. It's just another way to do service, I suppose. Kat and John are the behind-the-scenes experts. If it's quiet and everything's running smoothly, thank Kat and John. On September 18th, that's the next Higher Palooza, and it's going to feature speakers from Share What Works for You group. And Sunday, September 25th, is the next Varieties workshop, which is going to feature a panel led by Xander and Yuichi on the diversity of recovery. These are two pretty interesting people. That's a pretty interesting topic. I'm going to be there. The next ICSA virtual conference will be October 29th and 30th. It is on Zoom because of health reasons. We were hoping to reschedule our fated 2020 in-person Washington, D.C. conference this year, and we've pulled the plug on that. We're going virtual. Hope you can join us. And go to aasecular.org for upcoming announcements. There's also the monthly secular AA speaker meeting where we travel the world: Hong Kong, South Africa, Montreal, Poland. We're going to Jersey City on Labor Day weekend, so join us. Now I need a volunteer. Forgot to ask for one. Let's see a show of hands, and from our randomizer, we'll pick a reader. Jerry wins, and John will post the reading for us.
Jerry, thanks for recovering alcoholic. In AA, we are supposed to be bound together in the kinship of universal suffering. Therefore, the full liberty to practice any creed or principle or therapy should be the first consideration. Hence, let us not pressure anyone with individual or even collective views. Let us instead accord to each other the respect that is due to every human being as he tries to make his way towards the light. Let us always try to be inclusive rather than exclusive. Let us remember that each alcoholic among us is a member of AA, so long as he or she declares. And that's from Bill Wilson's 1965 address to the Central Service Conference. Thanks for letting me read, you guys.
Beautifully done. And thanks, Lori, for volunteering too. As free thinkers, we aspire to open-mindedness and appreciating the sharing of others, particularly those with whom we disagree. We ask only that everyone who shares, please do so without attempting to dissuade, argue, or disrespect others' shares or beliefs. As a group, we're secular, that is, we do not endorse and we don't oppose any system of belief, nor do we have any quarrel with any form of religion. We also do not use prayers of any kind in our workshop or meetings. Our only wish is to assure suffering alcoholics that you can find sobriety in AA without having to accept anyone else's beliefs, nor having to deny your own. By the way, during the speaker portion, the chat function will be only available to send messages to hosts or co-hosts. It'll be wide open, so you can chat directly with other members once we get into the show of hands portion of it, and you can post generally to the chat. That'll be fine as well. So yeah, we will have a Q&A session, or just a sharing session when Jeffrey and I finish our little chit chat. We ask that you keep your microphone muted until it's your turn to share. So Jeffrey Munn, well, anyway, I don't want to get too much into his history because I'm going to sort of ask him about that. But he has an interesting perspective in terms of where he came from. He was talking about his first foray into the 12 steps casually when we got in. We'll get into that a little bit more. But there have been a lot of people who have written about the 12 steps, written alternative 12 steps. And Jeffrey's take is one that I just find, I think he has the perfect word for it. It's practical. Now, let's just get into it. Where is Jeffrey? Okay, let's unmute this guy. Jeffrey, just can you just start with giving a little background with your personal experience with the 12 steps? What your first impressions were, your experience with early recovery, and your personal sort of journey that's sort of 12-step-ish.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. I'm profoundly humbled by this. There's a lot of people here. I also want to sincerely apologize to anybody who was here expecting to see me last month. I had a misunderstanding in terms of whether we had confirmed, and I dropped the ball on that, so I apologize.
Well, that was my second question. Everybody wanted to know, how was Vegas? But anyway.
It was great. My sister got married, and not a drink was drank. for me. Many drinks were drank. I did not drink any drinks. I didn't drink. So yeah, so I started, I'm pretty.
Let it drop, nigga. Don't test me. I'm gonna give.
Okay, carry on, please.
I have to say that is my first Zoom bomb I've ever experienced.
Oh, I
had heard about them for so long, and that was the first one I've experienced. That was all right. Okay, I'm gonna remember that. Okay, so basically that in a nutshell is my recovery. No, so I started by I bet you that person believes in God. I started by just going to meetings for Marijuana Anonymous, as I was mentioning earlier. Like that was sort of my main thing. I smoked a ton of weed, and then I would try and quit, and when I quit, it always morphed into some other addiction. It was either alcohol, I had a run-in with meth, other drugs, and no matter what I was doing at the moment, I was doing it absolutely alcoholically, addictively. And so I started, I was just a phenomenally low bottom addict. I couldn't function at all. I couldn't hold a job. I couldn't maintain any relationships. I was burning down all the relationships with my family, my friends. And so it didn't take a lot, luckily, for me to realize like, okay, this isn't working. And I started just with good old fashioned therapy, just therapy. And it was with a cognitive behavioral therapist who had no concept of addiction and how addiction worked. And in our second session, he said something to me to the effect of, I don't understand. It's so clear to you why this is bad. Why do you continue to do it? And I realized that he just was not a good person to talk to about addiction. And so then I found Marijuana Anonymous, which was, I think, is kind of a big reason why I wasn't chased away from the program so early on, because the potheads in Marijuana Anonymous are very flexible. They're very flexible. There wasn't the best recovery there, but it also was not very rigid. And I think that was a good intro to the program that got me bought in and didn't chase me away. So that's where I started. And I started working the 12 steps with a sponsor, and a lot of it made sense. Step one made a lot of sense. I can't control my using right now, and my life is unmanageable. Okay, pretty easy. And then, step 2 and 3, it started to get a little funky, but I kind of could make sense of them. And then just as things continued, I just found more and more places where I just felt like I was faking it. I felt like I was trying my best to do it genuinely, but it felt like, the word I use is, it felt like it was being shoehorned into my recovery. Like it just felt forced. It didn't make sense. Like one of the exercises that comes to mind that a sponsor had me do was to write a list of all the qualities that I want in my higher power. And I can understand the value in that sort of as a hypothetical type of experiment, and sort of like understanding maybe what we want to give ourselves. Like I can see some value in that, but it was very much like, this is going to be your higher power. I'm like, what? Like I'm making my higher power? That doesn't make sense. How's it my higher power if I don't understand. This doesn't make any sense. And, this is a really long answer to your question. I should have just done the presentation style, I guess. Anyway, so that was and it just was grating for a very long time, and it just felt like it didn't fit, and there was a constant need to translate in my head and kind of twist it in my head to make sense in my own worldview, and it just took too much effort, and it felt fake, and I kind of got disillusioned with the whole thing. So that was my experience. But luckily there were people that were of the same mind as me, and I stuck
Right.
with them and was able to get some good recovery.
You know, when you describe this sort of open-minded, take what you like, leave the rest, sort of free thinkers approach to recovery that you came to, I would describe the same thing. Just the time and place where I came into AA was what I call pre-fundamentalism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people know I didn't read the book until I was sober, maybe 11 years or so, the book Alcoholics Anonymous. It was the recovery I grew up on was one alcoholic talking to another. You know, there were people read daily reflection books, but meetings were speaker meetings or sometimes discussion meetings. There weren't a lot of book-based meetings. So I never faced you have to do something this way, or everyone encouraged me to find my own way. And it sounds like you did too. But when did you decide that the wording really needed to be confronted? Were you working with another person? Was it just for your own personal edification? When did you take a stab at doing your first, 12 suggested steps according to Jeff M?
Well, it's a good question. So I did not come up with any of the principles or any of the ideas that are in my book, really. These are things that I learned through learning about psychology, and nothing there is like this radical new philosophy that I've come up with. It was just when I started to get good therapy with people that were both educated and trained in psychology and had 12-step experience, and I started to hear phrasings and explanations of the 12 steps and their impact on people in a way that made sense to me. I just was like, oh my gosh, that just makes so much sense. It's like, why was I not given this presentation of it earlier in my recovery? Like, why was this not available? Why did I have to search so hard for this? Why did it take so long for me to find someone who said, like, letting go of what you can't control is a huge part of recovery? I mean, obviously that's in the Serenity Prayer, but it's in the Serenity Prayer, and it's not, it's still in sort of religious language. So, and just explain to me in a practical way, and and I was shown how to actually practice it with people in interactions. In group therapy, there would be actual interactions with other people where I could practice it, and it just made sense. It just made sense. It was practical and it worked. And so just over time, I kind of was making sense of it in my own head. I was like, oh, okay. So when this is happening, this is my understanding of what that is, based on what I've experienced and based on what I've learned and based on what I've seen with clients and stuff too. So yeah, it just made sense to me. And I was like, I feel like there needs to be more of this out there. This approach needs to be more available. And I would say that there wasn't a point where I went, okay, now I'm going to try the steps this way.
Right.
That's how I did the steps when I did them, because it was the only way I could do them, really. Like, when I did them, I had to make those changes in the process. So it wasn't as though I worked the steps the traditional way and then I was like, okay, let's put these new steps together. And this was how I had to work the steps.
So if someone reads the practical steps, are they getting an insight into what your own personal process was?
Yeah, just my understanding of the steps. And it's my understanding of the steps. And I felt like it was something that could be beneficial to other people. It's by no means me saying this is what the steps should mean to everybody.
Yeah. Now, step 2 and step 3, for instance, 2 is trusted that a healthy lifestyle was attainable through social support and consistent self-improvement. And step 3 is committed to a lifestyle of recovery, focusing only on what we could control. Now, did you intentionally not use sort of higher power language, like some people in the secular community find a GOD acronym they can use, good orderly direction, or group of drunks, or something like that? But you didn't even use that language at all. Was that quite intentional, or it just turned out that way?
Yeah, it was really intentional because I looked for alternative higher powers. I was like, okay, I can buy into the higher power idea. So maybe, a lot of people, group of drunks or group of drug users, their higher power. It's like, okay, so I'll make that my higher power. But then when I started looking at the ways the concept of a higher power was incorporated into the program, that didn't make sense in all contexts. Right. So I'm turning my will and my life over to a group of drunks. I guess that sort of makes sense. Like, all right, I'm trusting other people's input when I make decisions in my life. Okay. But then it would be like, get on your knees and like let it go to your higher power. And I'd be like, so I'm letting it go to the group. So am I like, how does it just didn't like there was no one higher power that kind of fit all the different ways people would apply the higher power to their program, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense.
And so for me, it's a matter of higher powers. I have different higher powers that, that have different functions in my life. So, for me, the cosmos, the universe, just all of existence is kind of that higher power that makes me feel part of something bigger than myself. It helps me put things into perspective. It helps me realize that I'm not in control. So that's one of my higher powers. That's one of the things that, and yeah.
Did you ever struggle with the number 12? Like, looking back at it now, do you think it's really 10 processes or 14 processes? Or
I think depending on how you kind of squint your eyes and tilt your head, it could be 12, it could be 6, it could be 24. Like, you can divide it up a bunch of different ways. I think a lot of the steps have a lot of different components, and if you wanted to, you could split them into 2 different steps. And I just stuck with 12 because it paralleled the traditional program pretty well. So people that were in the traditional program could still use this alternative sort of approach and be kind of, not feel like they're on a completely different path than the other people they're in meetings with. But I'm thinking of I've been outlining a sobriety book for people not in 12-step at all. And one of the thoughts I had was writing it as 3 phases of recovery. And it still would be a lot of the same stuff. It's not like this book is going to be completely wildly different and it's just going to be framed a little different, packaged a little different. And it might be packaged in a way that someone is like, oh, this makes sense. And now I can understand it, whereas 12 steps is overwhelming. These 3 phases, I can go from phase to phase, and it's easier for I don't know, it's just a lot of it just depends on how it's presented and how a person can make sense of it. So I'm a fan of there being as many different interpretations, hopefully not to the point of overwhelming people and scaring them away, but, lots of different approaches, because, I'm sure I've certainly had the experience of being told some piece of wisdom about life some point in my life, or, a bunch of times throughout my life. And then for some reason, when one person says it a certain way, I'm like, oh, that makes total sense to me. It's just kind of a human thing. The message has to be packaged a certain way and at a certain time for me to really take it in. And so this happens to be an approach that people resonated with, and I'm grateful for that.
Now, one of the happy coincidences is, I don't know if it's the right way to put it, but the bubble in which you wrote this in. Like, you were sober and living in SoCal, clean and sober, in 2014. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah. But you didn't know there was like this We Agnostics and Freethinkers.
Wait, when I wrote,
International.
hold on, when did I write?
You
Are you,
wrote it
wait,
in
2014?
20
Where am I? Who am I? Who are you all? Where?
2019 it was written.
Yeah, the book was written in 2019. I
Yeah.
got sober in 2006.
2006. Yeah. So you just, it wasn't in your radar that there was this sort of agnostic collection of people gathering in Santa Monica in 2014. And you weren't familiar with some of the other people who had talked about like the Buddhist approach to the 12 steps, or, some of the earlier secular books written in the 90s by Martha Cleveland and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And I think why I call it, sort of a beautiful coincidence is like you are completely unabashed. You're not speaking. You're not trying to, speak to a particular audience. You're not influenced by other writers or people that demand this from their secular approach, or people who demand that from their secular approach.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about how you just started connecting with the sort of secular recovery community?
Well, I mean, I owe that almost entirely to AA Agnostica and, the people who ran that. They reached out to me, they found my book and, kind of got me linked up with it. But yeah, I had not actively searched for, I didn't have a lot of hope that there was a large group, at least a large group that had been successful and, had found a way to connect with mainstream AA and make themselves known to them. So yeah, it was really through them.
Yeah, but I think it's great that it is sort of uninfluenced by the pressures of, like, being a member of a secular home group and everything the regulars there say and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I wanted it to be genuine, and I wanted
Yeah.
it to be my perspective. But then I always want to make it clear that that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's where it's coming from.
And you also talk about staying sober in general and the 12 steps as a component of that. You have a chapter called What the 12 Steps Miss. And this is the last thing I'm going to ask about. And I've got 169 other co-hosts that I'm sure have questions for you as well. But can you just speak to, the steps are great. I'm a happy customer. But that, it doesn't mean that because I did them, I have had no pitfalls in my life since. And you address that in your book as well. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Specifically to,
well, things like health and fitness and, just sort of how you sort of face the world and finding meaning and all of that sort of stuff.
Oh, that's a lot. I mean, yeah, there's just so much that I feel like the steps brush up against, but don't get into. And I found that some of the people that I met with the strongest recovery are people who have not been afraid to go, find these areas where the steps sort of touch upon, and then really venture out beyond the 12-step program to look at those and find ways to incorporate that into their lives, and I was listening to a podcast by a couple of total just nerd health doctors, and they were talking about how, like, there's been so much research done on the brain and different practices, meditation and nutrition and things that impact the brain, and nothing, and I hate saying this because I'm not doing it right now, and nothing has even remotely close to the same impact on one's brain as exercise. Yeah. Nothing. And it pisses me off because I'm not exercising and I know how much I need to do it, and I go in and out with that. but there's so much more. There's so much more out there that can help a person emotionally regulate. And, you know, I think one of the issues that I had with sort of traditional AA, and you would hear people say pretty confidently, like, there is no problem that the 12 steps can't help you address. The 12 steps are a blueprint for life. If you incorporate the 12 steps into your life, you're good. And that just was like, that to me is dangerous thinking. And that, you know, I really try not to criticize other people's viewpoints, but that one I feel like can really cause some harm to people. There's so much more out there. And also this belief that alcoholism and addiction is it's also a little egotistical if you think about it, but it's some sort of condition, disease that is so unique, and that only that can be solved, that only a spiritual solution can remedy it, can help it, you know. And that sort of, it makes it different. It makes it this thing that, you know, you can't use other tools to help. It separates addicts and alcoholics from the rest of wellness and health community, you know. Does that make sense?
Sorry.
That makes sense. I'm kind of rambling, but the point is, I just think there's so much else out there that can aid and improve our recovery, and it's not, in my opinion, a great idea to close ourselves off from that.
Thank you. I got more questions, but so does everybody else. I just want to remind people, you can get your hands in the queue. I'm going to throw it over to John first, just because he's done the most work to sort of help make this happen. But I just want to remind people, everyone will have a chance to share or comment or ask questions, but it's not a debate. Just please be respectful of other people's share and what is true for them. And 9 out of 10 times, this is a safe space for everybody. And free thinkers are free to agree or disagree, and we all leave happy. So we aspire to open-mindedness and appreciating the share of others. Just that's the sort of buzzword.
Yes, and you can 100% tell me that I'm full of it and
he
wrong.
Can handle that.
I'm totally okay with
absolutely.
that.
Absolutely, you can take them on.
Keeps you on my toes
in any way, shape, or form.
And you might be right.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. You know, where will the good ideas come from if we don't question? And just keep in mind, this is being recorded for the audio, so keep anonymity in mind. And John R., just if you would like to jump in, and Elise is on deck.
Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate your interviewing. My voice is pretty much gone, so I really do appreciate it when you step in for me. And Jeff, thank you so much for being here. The only comment I wanted to make was, I think I might have talked to you about this privately, I'm not sure. I've been a student of the 12 and 12 for about 40 years. And I have always kind of had a problem with 6 and 7, the way that it's couched. And so I thought about writing a book, but I have to tell you, as an old academic, I would not have been as kind. I think I would have probably tried to do a critique, and I really appreciated your take on 6 and 7. Would you care to maybe speak to that for a couple of minutes?
Sure. 6 and 7 are two of the steps where I felt like there was the most reliance on God and a higher power, and the least sort of reliance on taking actions. And you know, and it changes depending on who you talk to and which fellowship's book you read. But you know, in the traditional big book, it's pretty short, something like 2 or 3 lines for both 6 and 7. So when it comes to character defects, there's just so much. There's so much there, and all of psychology and counseling and therapy is about that. It's about, people coming, usually, in most cases, coming with some sort of aspect of themselves that they don't like and want to change. So it's, I had a lot, and I've always been looking at my own stuff that I want to change. And, but I've also come to have a much more compassionate understanding of what a character defect is. 99% of the time, a character defect is some character trait that we've developed for a reason, to either keep us safe, or to help us cope, to help us get our needs met in the only way that we learned how or were taught how. But there's a million different approaches to how to change one's behavior and traits. And I went with sort of, a really practical, easy to follow, by no means the only, but kind of a cognitive behavioral approach, where you look at the thinking, where your thinking's distorted. What evidence is there for that distorted thinking? What evidence is there against it? What's a more realistic thought? And also just behavioral stuff. We are creatures of habit. We're animals. Behavioral training works on us, as much as we may not like to admit it. If you're selfish, you have to practice not being selfish. You have to practice giving, even if it's just a little bit, or, calling someone just to ask how they're doing, when usually you would call them to tell them all about everything you went through, and get what you need from them. It's doing the opposite. And at first it's going to feel weird, and it's going to feel unnatural, and it's going to feel fake, and it will be fake. But the more you do it, the less fake it becomes, as long as you're trying to do it genuinely, and you're really, putting some mindfulness and an intention into it. So yeah, I felt like there was just a lot there that could be shifted to a more empowering sort of view, rather than we're just going to ask some invisible being to take it away. It's like, okay, how can we identify it? How can we identify how to do the opposite? And how can we plan how to do it every day, or, as often as possible? I don't do it every day. So.
All right. Thanks, Jeffrey. I appreciate it. Okay, I will need to unmute you in order for you to be able to share. And at least that's the way it's supposed to be working, although it doesn't seem to be.
Thanks. I'm Elise. I'm in recovery. I don't know if I have a question for you, Jeffrey. I'm going to treat this just like a regular AA meeting, secular AA meeting. I'm in recovery, as I said, and I'm really glad I came. I came out of curiosity. I wanted to see and hear you because, okay, you said you were okay with this. I don't care for your book, and I'm sick and tired of people telling me how wonderful Jeffrey Munn is and how wonderful his book is. And I'm glad you're laughing. And you're just a regular guy, which is a relief. And I love what you said, because your book doesn't speak to me, but it speaks to a lot of people. So, I'm not going to bash your book. It just doesn't speak to me. There's things about it I don't like. I don't like the tone of it. I have issues, with being told what to do or what I should do or anything like that, or anything close to that. And they're my issues. So, I think it's wonderful that you do reach so many people, but you don't reach me. And and I'm going to hear so much after this, because I know so many of these people in this room. So I go to a lot of meetings, and I go to one where they do read out of your book. So I have heard pieces of it. It was recommended that I buy the book, but I'm not going to buy the book, because what I heard, I didn't care for that much. But it does, it does raise discussion, which I think is, when I put out a reading, I host a meeting once a week, and I bring in a lot of readings from anywhere else other than the big book, Jeffrey Munn, or Beyond Belief, because there's enough meetings that do those, So I try to find different things, and sometimes they're things that people don't like. And that's great because it starts discussion. So in ending, I like everything you said, though. You don't sound like your book, so that's good. I like what you said about you wrote those steps for you. And the funny thing is, recently, like I think 2 weeks ago, I just popped in my head, why don't I write my own steps based on what has worked for me in the last 19 years of recovery? And I wrote my own steps, and there's 9 of them, and I totally skipped 6 and 7, completely skipped it. I have no memory of them because they're so irrelevant. So I wrote my own steps, but I realized in order to get to the place where I could write my own steps, I studied a lot of the traditional steps and the other alternative steps. There's all kinds of alternative steps. And, I just came around full circle to this is what worked for me. But I had to find out a lot about what didn't work for me. And yes, I have you mentioned education and training and psychology. And sometimes that irritates people because I do tend to
Fine.
fall on psychology, on Psychology Today writings or things like that. But a lot of hands up, so I'm going to go, but it's very nice to meet you, and I don't worship you. Sorry. Bye.
Thanks, Elise. I'm sure that's a relief.
That was refreshing.
Okay, Tracy.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Tracy, and I'm a woman in recovery. Jeff, this is wonderful. I am so excited to finally have you speak here. Yeah, your book saved my life. For 2 years, I did go to the traditional AA and felt like a fool, felt like a phony, and so much resentment. Like, I couldn't believe that these people were talking about God and being hypocrites about the preamble. I was totally hypocritical, and I mentioned it several times. How do you stand there and say you believe in God, and this is not affiliated with any sect or denomination, and yet you talk about, I just didn't understand this at all. And sitting in meetings and listening to, people talk about God's going to do this for them, God's going to get me sober, God's going to remove my defects. And I'm like, you know what? There's a million people out there that are really sicker than you and are getting bombed and have no homes, but he's going to reach in and remove your defects. And I'm thinking to myself, no one's removing anything from me unless it's in an OR or a dentist chair. And the thing is that I'm 62. These defects, and I don't call them defects, I call them unhealthy characteristics. And I love that you said that. And they're here to stay, but because I have learned about, the actions that go along with these unhealthy characteristics, I'm a different person. And I don't, my unhealthy characteristics are there, but, I know how to handle them. And I'm not that same person that came in the door. I did my steps through the traditional, and on step 6, they were doing drop the rock. And all I could think of was, Mary, what a poor person, what mean people, leaving her there with a life jacket, with throwing her a life preserver, and they're still going. And I didn't even get that. So I called my sponsor and said, yeah, I'm done with the God thing. We've been talking about it for a while. And so I did the rest of my steps, and I redid my first 5 steps with your book. And I also sponsor women with your book, because as I tell people, and I have these women who believe in God, who have a higher power. I do not have a higher power. I am an atheist, and I called myself an atheist because I'm not confused. I'm not searching. And I do not want anyone to offer me a doorknob. And, the bigger than me, there's what's bigger than me? I don't know. But what I do know is that everybody here can do this without me, but I can't do it without them. And so I do sponsor these women through your book because it's the steps. It's all about the steps. I don't care what you put in there, strawberries, God, atheism, it doesn't matter. It's the steps, the actual steps, and how to stay sober. And so that's, I'm going to let other people share. So thank you so much. Really saved my life. And when I say that, it's because I feel good about being truthful to myself. So thank you again. I'm Tracy, and I'm a woman in recovery.
Thanks, Tracy. And how about Jeb?
Thank you, John. My name is Jeb, and I'm a grateful recovered addict, alcoholic. And I'm so happy that I did log in today to hear you, Jeffrey. And I must say, first of all, I'm happy that your book has been so successful. And I'm really grateful that so many people have found it useful in getting them on the path of recovery and keeping them there. That's a wonderful benefit to the suffering alcoholics and addicts who need that kind of message. Now, the however piece, and people who know me, that I have problems with Bill Wilson, Jeffrey Munn, and Glenn Rader, and several other authors trying to speak for others and saying we did these things, or but today I'm really happy to hear you talk about your own personal process in recovery and journey, because that makes a big difference. When I first bought my big book 40 some years ago, and I read the we sort of thing, I thought that was talking about the people in the fellowship right now, but it took me some time to start reading it as these are the steps they took, which are suggested as a program of recovery, that is suggested by Bill Wilson. And so, I think a lot of us have had to adapt the steps in some ways, the process, not taking that list of 12 sentences, but what Bill described on pages 60 through 88 and a few other things, and things that are in the personal stories and so forth, to make things a little bit clear. I'm going to say, my sponsor in Montana told me probably 30 some years ago, you need to quit hiding behind the big book. You need to talk about precisely how it works for you. And so that's something I'm still working on. And we mentioned of 6 and 7. My 6th step is I become willing to let go of anything and everything holding me back. And then 7 is I use whatever personal power and resources I find to help me confront self-limiting liabilities and defenses. And that's limiting liabilities and defenses. Those character weaknesses and defenses are exactly what I substitute for the idea of character and faults and so forth. So much of the language in your book I relate to, and a lot of it is because of my educational background too. I'm retired from my one of my professions. Well, actually, both of them today. But I think I've heard someone suggest a couple of years ago in secular AA. I think it's a good idea for everyone to write her own 12 steps that really describe what they're doing, because that's the only thing I have to offer to somebody else, is what is keeping me sober and growing and hopefully thriving. So I will say what I always do. I try to do a day at a time what they told me. And so today is day 16,073, but that's just one day at a time. So thanks again, Jeffrey, for coming to us today.
Thanks, Jeb. Larry,
alcoholic. My experience with the 12-step programs, the first stint was 25 years. And I relapsed and for a couple of years. And when I got back in, I started examining the process of relapse. I had been a counselor at a Gorski relapse unit. So I understood it as a process, not an event. It's the end result of the process. But when I came back in, and for 8 years now, I've really questioned a lot of the ways I work the steps and how I approach things. And I've discovered I'm an agnostic. 80%, I can't see a God of any kind. 20%, maybe. And the way I worked that 25 years was I prayed to whatever was out there. And prayer was an important part of my recovery in that first 25. This second 8, it seems hollow. And I've had the suggestion to meditate and ponder on things. What would be your suggestion or approach to, quote, prayer, or what's your approach to that? And I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate this whole atmosphere of free thinking. Thank you.
Good question. Actually, I like prayer, and I think I sort of look at prayer, at least the kind that I will do on occasion, sort of more like a Buddhist approach to prayer, which is not talking to any outside entity or deity, but just sort of an expression of intention or hopes, or and just on a purely, if we're really getting like scientific about it, you're using a different part of your brain, the part of your brain that's responsible for speech and language, to process things, and and you're kind of speaking to yourself. And so I think there's a real utility to just saying things out loud, to saying things like, may this person get everything that they want. I think that if you're in a space to do that towards someone maybe that you resent, and you can say, you know what, I hope they have a great life. And you can say it, for some people, saying that out loud is really helpful. For me, it is. So I like prayer. I just don't think that, if it works, it works. What the problem I have then is if someone says, yesterday, I prayed that I would be relieved of my anxiety about da 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 da, and it worked. Therefore, Jesus is real, and you need to believe in him. There's just a jump in logic there that I was, wait, huh? So I believe that the praying for anxiety to be removed did help you. I absolutely believe that. And I believe that I've had that experience. I'm just like, oh, I got to let go of this, or, may everyone be, free of harm and suffering, sort of the Buddhist approach, like I said, or just talking to myself. I'm doing my best, whatever it is. Affirmations are a kind of prayer, I think. But then when you have an impact from doing that, and then jump to a conclusion about the nature of reality, and then push that reality on other people, that's where I have the problem. It's like, that's a whole, you just went a whole different place. It's fine to say, yesterday I prayed and this happened, and for me, that's evidence that so and so is working in my life. Okay, cool. But yeah, when it starts being put on other people, what it means, or what's actually happening, or the mechanics behind prayer, that's when I get a little more. Why are people arguing in the chat?
Sassy's good.
Stop arguing, guys. Take it.
We're not arguing.
No.
CJ, maybe you can comply.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. All right. So I come in peace for the most part. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I just want to say that I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad for secular AA, and I'm glad for secular meetings. Something that you said, well, and also like spending years on my knees was not the best idea for me personally. That's just my story when I wasn't taking a lot of necessary action. But okay, so you mentioned that, I do think about like the spiritual aspect of things. I'm an atheist. I'm not an angry atheist, but I'm 100% an atheist. And I know that in the big book, I remember when I read for the first time that Carl Jung told Roland, right? Or wrote a letter saying, Roland is like an alcoholic of the helpless variety. There's porn, okay, there's porn, okay, sorry. Flashes of porn are showing up on the pictures. So Now, okay, so I'm thinking, so I'm a therapist and I'm thinking, so Young said that Roland was an alcoholic of the helpless variety, and the only uh, solution to that would be religion, would be a spiritual program. And I guess like for me, I do like the Buddhist stuff. I like loving kindness. I try to do it. But also, like as a woman, and I go to a lot of women's meetings, we've been shamed so much in our lives. And a lot of us have been like assaulted, and a lot of us have been preyed upon in traditional meetings. So there is that part about like knowing that I can speak up for myself, and that it's not, I don't always have to let go of things I can't control if they're harming me. So I'm kind of learning about that language. Part for me that I still get stuck about is, so I would love to find like a word for religion or spirituality. I guess it's ethical humanism. That's the closest I found, ethical humanism. If I'm an ethical humanist, I seek to not harm myself or others, and I believe in like the potential of myself. Because at the end of the day, what this all comes down to is, I'm not gonna be alive if I drink again. Like I've come so close to being dead, and even recently. So whatever I have to do, like when I show up to meetings, I'm not arguing with anyone. No way. I'm here because other people have had a problem with alcohol, and now they're either not drinking or trying not to drink. And I love everything I've heard about your book. And I go to meetings where we talk about it. I love the secular 12 steps. I was at the Atheist and Agnostic Convention in Austin, Texas a few years back. That was fantastic. And I just want to say I'm glad to be here. And it was a rough week for me. I was, feeling like ending things, and I'm not anymore. And I'm very grateful to be here. Let's just all be nice and help each other not drink by being nice to each other.
Well, that wasn't very disagreeable, but thank you very much, CJ. That was wonderful. Richard, please come in.
Hi there, I'm Richard. Thank you. I'm 9.5 years sober. I just want to say first, Jeffrey, I love that background. It feels almost entirely like Doctor Who, but I don't recognize it, so I'm left confused.
It's Batman.
It's Batman with a little, okay, all right, thank you. Okay. So I came in, I was a pot addict. I'm a recovering pot and alcohol addict. But I got sober in a place that was welcoming, and I could get away with talking that way. And I was also, because I'd been suicidal, I was prescribed antidepressants. So I came into meetings as a pot and alcohol addict on antidepressants, and I wasn't chased away. And I thought, great, this is working for me. I was doing a lot of meetings. I heard, take what you like and leave the rest behind. And then as years went by, I kept hearing, do it as it's written in the big book. The big book has all the answers, things you spoke about earlier. This is the entire way of life. You have to find a higher power or you'll die. I mean, all these things that didn't sit right. But I've been through the steps, sort of. I fell apart on the 6th and 7th every time. I've been in 4 programs. I believe I've done them in theory 5 times, but always with this problem with the 6th and 7th step. So I'm leading to a question. You have this thing in your book about the types of communication, in your section about things that the big book doesn't cover, that AA doesn't cover. The types of communication you have, passive, aggressive, passive aggressive, assertive. And I've lived most of my life being passive. I run away. I often ask for help in the way that you talked about. I will pray, in effect, although I won't pray to anything. I say, help me stand up for myself. Help me not run away. So passive is sort of my default mode, but I certainly won't do aggressive or passive aggressive. But you talk about assertive as, it seems like the clear right way to be. Well, I have this problem. A week ago, I was doing 8 12-step meetings a week, mostly in Al-Anon and ACA. The only AA meeting I do anymore is because I just discovered through Higher Palooza and the Stonehenge Freethinkers, I discovered an AA meeting, and so I'm trying to go back to that one. But I've been doing these steps for 8 months with 2 guys in a step study group in ACA. And last week, the guy broke the meeting. I've shared stuff in that meeting I've never shared before because it's got childhood trauma. There's a lot of stuff that comes up. And the guy said, so it turns out you're a liar. I'm like, time out. In what way am I a liar? I said, well, you pretend you've done the first, second, and third steps, but you don't believe in God. I say, I don't believe in God. I've told you, I tell you, I will pray. I will put my hands out and ask for help, but I won't do it to God because I don't believe in God. There's 14 lists in ACA. I filled them all out. I read them all to this group. I said, everything I said is true. He said, no, we went through the first, second, and third step, and you still believe in yourself rather than God. I'm like, yeah, I said that. I believe in my true self. I believe in my higher self. I believe I have all these character behaviors. I have these survival traits. I am working on fixing them, but I don't believe that this thing outside is going to fix them. If it's a creator, it didn't create me flawed. I don't believe it's real. So I believe that I have to fix myself. And it got ugly and nasty and it went on. And he said, I can't believe I wasted 8 months of my life with you, a liar. And I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. And good luck finding a 12-step program anywhere that lets you do it without God. So I pull up your page and I look at, passive, aggressive. I look at ways to respond to this. I mean, I'm done. I'm clearly done. I'm mixed between, I'm glad that I spend these 8 months because it's a gentler program and I tried hard to find peace with a higher power through this program. And I didn't, I come to the end, it's like, I can't believe that this other thing outside me is going to fix me. But I was really bad. I was accused of having no humility for believing that I can fix my own problems. It was just really, really ugly ending. And so my question for you really is, if I don't respond, we're done. I mean, we're done, but I feel like I haven't said my piece over, this is what it means to you to be doing God's will, because this guy's very clear that he only lives by God's will, that he doesn't believe in his own self. He lives by God's will. So God's will told you to shit all over me and to accuse me of having no humility and being a liar. And I'm like, do I just give up on 12 steps entirely? I mean, have I screwed up by getting myself in so many 12-step meetings where most of the 12 steps are really about, you're defective, you're a piece of crap, you have to let something else fix you. I'm obviously getting emotional here, but I'm like, I was doing 8 meetings. I've reached the point of 8 meetings and I'm feeling like, am I done? So anyway, I guess that's my question. Is there still a path forward for me in 12-step and a way to communicate with people? Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, there's always a path forward. And I think it's just about, I'm sorry, I was a little distracted throughout that because the chat is just a hot mess right now. And I'm glad someone's turning it off. So, and porn popped up in the middle of all. So I just, so little distracted. But yeah, I think there's absolutely a path forward. And I think it's just a matter of finding the people that you resonate with and being able to let go of the people that you don't resonate, which is hard, especially when they're not letting go of your behaviors. When they're the ones commenting on your behaviors and what you're doing wrong and stuff like that, letting go of that when they're, the ones that are not able to let go of how you're working your program. So I hope that answers your question. You can, if I missed any of that, please send me an email. I'll happily talk to you more, but yeah.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Richard. And, even in secular AA, you'll find plenty of people you can disagree with. John C., how are you doing?
Hi, John Alcoholic. So I have to give credit where credit is due. Way back in the early 1980s, we had our We Agnostic meeting in Hollywood, California. And Charlie Polachek started that meeting. And but Charlie had a friend named Merle. And Merle would always say, the higher power is anything that challenges your ego. And, I was sort of new at that time and I didn't quite understand that. I had written my, what I call 12 steps for all beliefs by then. But I didn't quite get what Merle was talking about. But then a year or two later, I was at another meeting And we were saying the Lord's Prayer, and at the part of the prayer where it says, deliver us from evil, somebody shouted out, deliver us from ego. And all of a sudden it hit me, you know, the whole religious thing is really just metaphors of natural human behavior. But most people that are caught up in the religious thing don't really understand that. And, you know, when AA was started back in the 30s, they didn't really understand that either, although the big book is actually written in two different languages. Part of it is secular and part of it is, you know, like religious language. I always point out Appendix 2 that specifically says, you know, he's actually aiming at, you know, modern neuroscience and unsuspected inner resource. I mean, he sort of alluded to that, didn't really explain it very well, but anyway, so today I'm realizing that in fact, page 47 of the big book says anything we say is however you take it. You know, it's your understanding of any religious terms or any terms or spiritual terms or the term God even, however you understand it. So what I'm doing now, finally, I've had my ego challenged enough that I no longer have resentments about, you know, religious language or, you know, my Catholic upbringing or any of that. And I'm actually going back, actually a member of 2 traditional big book study groups now. And I'm trying to understand the big book, you know, line by line as metaphors of natural human behavior. So at this point, 40 years later, I've become an atheist big book thumper. Thank you.
Kenji.
Hi, everybody. Kenji, addict alcoholic. Hi, Jeff. I enjoyed the Q&A at the beginning. I know your book well because I've been a attender every single week at the Stonehenge Steps group, Wednesday meeting in the UK, out of the UK, and we read your book cover to cover in that meeting. And we're now on, in the time I've been going there, we're now on the second round through, we're past all the steps and into the material that comes after the steps, where we're spending 2 weeks on physical fitness and the part about what the steps don't cover. And I don't totally agree with how you rewrote the steps. Some of the steps, especially steps 2 and 3, seem a little abrupt to me. You know, trust that a healthy life, a recovery lifestyle, and commit to that lifestyle seems a little early in the process in steps 2 and 3. I mean, in my mind, it's step 2 for me was kind of noticing that there's something afoot here in these rooms that's working, and maybe it can work for me. So step 3 for me was just making the decision to go with it and suspend my disbelief and do the next thing, which was the big scary 4th step, which I got a tremendous amount out of. But just like with the foundational literature, like the big book and the 12 and 12, I try not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And if I don't, just because I don't resonate with everything, not to say, oh, this is a crock of shit and just throw it out. I love that John shared just before me and mentioned and invoked the spirit of Charlie Polachek, because that was my home group. And the first time I came to AA, I found the We Agnostics group in Hollywood, California, that he had founded. And he would say back then, this was the mid 80s, he said that he came into AA an atheist, and 15 years of sobriety had made him a better atheist. But then he'd go on to say there was no step he couldn't work as an atheist. So just that one sentence was enough to give me license to realize that I could interpret these steps and work them in a way that made sense for me. That I could essentially filter out the religiosity, which didn't work for me because I was not raised with any religion. And I tried at first to like hold my hands like the praying hands ceramic and get on my knees and do all the things that people told me to do. That just didn't really work for me. I really enjoy your book. I enjoyed the way we use it to basically, we don't pray at the altar of Jeffrey Munn at Stonehenge Steps. We use it as the basis for discussion. And we have some great discussions there. And I agree with what John R. said about, I love the way you do steps 6 and 7 in your book. We spend a lot of time at that meeting on step 7, going through, the different sections where you suggest healthy, the different suggestions about healthy lifestyles. I have a couple of questions for you. One is, a year ago, I was waiting with bated breath for your step working guide workbook. I'm wondering if that's still an ongoing project. And I'm also wondering, do you consider yourself an AA member at this point? Do you go to meetings? I assume if you go to meetings, you must go to traditional meetings, because we don't see you at secular meetings except when, like this, where you're the guest speaker. And I'm wondering why aren't you curious about secular meetings?
All right, you're really you're holding me accountable here. All right, so number one, the workbook. I finally last week finished the rough draft of the workbook. However, it's such a process. Even after the rough draft, I got to get some people to read it. I got to get some professional editing on it. I want it to stand on its own. I don't want it to be, I feel like it does, but I also don't want it to be something where it's like, oh, you got to read my other book to understand this. So I want to make sure it's complete. And so my hope is to get it published by the end of the year. That's the aim. That's what I'm shooting for. I'm gonna want to do some marketing and stuff and all that. And obviously, if anyone wants to read the rough draft, I'm sending it out to any proofreaders that want to just read it and give me feedback. No huge rush there. And what was the other one? Going to meetings. So, I've talked about this before and I'm pretty open about it. I don't go to a lot of meetings. I have some pretty close friends in recovery. I have a therapist who's very well-versed in recovery. For me, the most effective thing for me is being connected to other people in recovery and talking to them regularly. And regularly being on top and helping other people, which fortunately I do in my own career, which is now my part-time career, but as therapy and helping other people. So at the moment, I feel like I have a good recovery network. Should I go to more meetings? Possibly. I've never really liked meetings very much, to be perfectly honest. I don't like meetings. I don't like the and I do not judge anybody for liking meetings, and I wish I liked meetings more, but I find the formal sharing part of it, I find it too formal. I like just sitting around I love the fellowship. I love sitting, which is what I still do. I sit around the table with people and talk and talk about our experiences and talk about our thoughts about recovery and hold each, and have crosstalk and, with people that I trust and people that understand my approach to recovery and I understand theirs. That's what's the most helpful for me, is sort of smaller groups. Meetings, I remember people would, I always heard people say, like, you'll never leave a meeting feeling worse than when you went. And that's completely not true for me. I did not like meetings. A lot of them were very frustrating to me. And I have ADHD, like bona fide ADHD. I don't mean that as like I have trouble concentrating. I do have ADHD. And sitting for an hour and folding my hands and listening to people talk, it's honestly painful for me sometimes. So that's all my shitty excuses for why I don't go to meetings. So yeah, I love everybody I've met in this community. And I'd like to go to more meetings. I love doing these, but I appreciate you holding me accountable on that. It does keep me on my toes and keeps me from co-signing my own BS if and when there is some. There always is some. Anyway, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, if I could just add one other thing. So at some meetings we read, like for instance, Beyond Belief has a Monday step study, and we've read your book and various other books as our source for the step study. And one of the books we've read is Beth H's book, We're Not All Egomaniacs. And I and others have critiqued the book based on what we read in the meeting. And she was actually present, and she was quite clear that that was really unfair, that we had only, that just reading bits and pieces of her book was not fair to judge her book based on the little bits and pieces we had read in the meeting. And I think that probably applies to your book too, is that it's a whole work. It's not, I mean, that if we've heard bits and pieces in a meeting, maybe that's not enough to judge it by. So.
Thanks. We haven't been really sort of strict on time or anything like that, but we're getting up to the 90-minute mark. So just keep it to one question if you can, or comment, and I'd love to hear from everybody. But next up is Derek from Dublin. Here we go.
I think we got there. Yeah. Hi, Jeffrey. Super fascinating listening to you. I appreciate it. As soon as John said it, I do have a couple of questions, Joe. And, so sorry, I'm a classic AA. Is that, well, I love that you use the word perspective, and in relation to, and I've been loved listening to you and the way you share, because you seem to be, I'm only new to secular AA, and I'm fascinated by the fact that you wrote this independently of really getting introduced to this whole area of AA, or whatever it is. And I suppose I'd use a term from William James, overbelief. And what people share about, because I am getting to the question about, oh, somebody came to me and said the 12 steps to fix everything in my life, I must believe in God. That's their perspective, isn't it, Jeffrey, in a way, and why I'm around a long time. And it did work for them. They got God, they got thing, and they had no other troubles. It didn't start another journey. I looked at the 12 steps as opening me up to start another journey. It's been a long journey. So I suppose my question leads to the following, that since I'm only new to agnostics or free thinkers, and I would look at those members that come to other members and said stuff like that, that's their perspective. That's their experience. That's all. That's as far as they go in the journey. And I always like the concept of middle of the road, because that's where I see myself now that I still go to classic and I come to these ones. Is in your experience of, seeing, doing the stuff with agnostics and free thinkers, do you experience an overbelief in an anti-God, and then people trying to, you know what I mean? Because I quote Eisenhower, I use all the usable surface, the extremes of the gutters. I just use what used to me. So Jeffrey, that's my question. In your experience with agnostic, and you've come to it late after you've written the book, do you not equally sense an overbelief in some of the members? And they seem to be very willing to share about why they don't believe in something, but yet not acknowledge that the other person they're talking to has equal right to believe in what they be, because they're both perspectives. They're both perspectives. So
such a good question. Such a good question. I love this question. And the answer is emphatically yes. I have found, my perspective has been that in any group, if it hangs around long enough, a dogma will emerge, just meaning a strict belief in something. And then what happens is this dogma sort of becomes dogma and is passed on, and it's not a malicious thing, I think, in most cases. I think it's just the way groupthink works, which is one of the reasons I'm glad that I wasn't part of the secular community when I really wanted this book to just be my perspective, you know, with some ideas and some influence, but no, like, this is how you know, I'm very scientifically minded. I believe, you know, pretty firmly, almost dogmatically, in the scientific process, in the process of constantly questioning, looking for where you might be wrong, you know, and if something is true, it will stand up to scrutiny. And scrutinizing, you know, everything until it's pretty much proven. And nothing can really, other than math, nothing can really be proven. So no matter what, I think we need to couch, I like to couch what I say in, this is what I think I know based on this evidence. This was my experience. This is what I think it means. Here's something you can try. I mean, you'll see a lot of, some people may call them weasel words, because I'm not making any, you know, firm, you know, claims or anything, but it's, you know, there's not a lot I think we can make firm claim, even really rigorously done psychological research. I many of you may know, or some of you may know, that, you know, in psychology, there's sort of a crisis of duplicating results right now. Like in research, in formal psychological research, there's an issue where a lot of the conclusions that have been drawn through research in psychology are not being replicated, which is crucial to finding truth, right? You need to replicate the results of a study, and that's really hard to do. So, you know, I think anytime, for sure, anytime I find myself really convinced of something, I have to be careful. I have to be careful, and am I getting swept up in some kind of dogma, some kind of groupthink? How much of an emotional charge do I have around this belief that's causing me to discount evidence against it? So yeah, but I think it's just human nature. You know, we want answers, we want to believe something, and, you know, we want to have certainty in a world that is very complicated and uncertain. And so we will tend towards dogma, I think.
All right, Jeffrey, this is my cheeky question, because you're a trained counselor, okay? I'd rather, you know, I like you already, is that I've been around the rooms a long time, okay? And I have met many a member who's gone on to become a counselor, okay? And, you know, you've done it as well in your own way. Now, I would ask, it's meant in jest, but I'm always intrigued with this. There's an awful lot of those people, I would say, they haven't really gone into themselves and fixed themselves. And therefore, I do have a question mark about, fuck me, how do they become, what are they counseling? Heal thyself physician, you know? But yeah, they come out with their qualification. That, Jeffrey, I appreciate you don't have to answer that. You don't feel like you need to answer it.
I love talking about this stuff. I'm happy to talk to you about it. There's so much to that question. It would take an hour for me to just address it, but it's a good question. I'm a counselor, I'm a therapist myself, you know, so I have a lot to say about that, and it's a great question, but I'm not sure I have the time to really address it. So email me, and I'm happy to talk to you about it.
Thanks so much, Derek. And thanks everyone for waiting. We're getting through as best we can. Back to your time zone, Jeffrey. Arlene from San Diego.
Arlene, alcoholic. I can stop drinking. I can't stop thinking. So the problem's always right here with me. I'm glad I came today, because looking at people tells me more about people than reading just a book. And I find no matter what I read, I get something from parts, and there are parts I don't get anything from. I'm 84 years old. I'm 53 years sober. And I want to tell you that I don't have a question, but I want you to get to some meetings and find a meeting that works for you, because I've watched too many people over the years that quit going to meetings that don't stay sober. And one of the reasons I'm sober as long as I am is I didn't drink and I didn't die. But I changed meetings when I didn't get what I needed from meetings. I don't identify as an agnostic or not, or well, the two, atheist. I identify as a free thinker. And I was fortunate enough, Jimmy Burwell was in my home group, and Jimmy's one of the two people that insisted on God as we understand him. And for me, and I text you this, so I don't know if you read it or not. I don't use the word higher. I ask myself, what's the power that keeps me sober? And the power that keeps me sober and has from the beginning is sobriety. Because I learned to ask myself in the beginning, can I do this and not drink? Can I do this and not drink? And that's what I asked myself. But I had to find words that worked for me for the words that were in the book. And for me, prayer is simply what I think and what I say, because what I'm thinking sets me up to what I'm saying. And when I'm peaceful with what I'm thinking, because I do a lot of writing about what I'm thinking, and as soon as I get it down black and white, I know what's none of my business. And I love step 6 and 7 because of my badge. Now, I don't know if you can see my badge. You're a cutie, by the way, and I'm a lesbian. So for me to say you're a cutie, that's a big one there. Anyway, asshole stand, I am an asshole in many ways. And one of the things that I don't like about Zoom meetings, and I'm hearing from other agnostics and atheists, is the big difference I see between a Zoom meeting and a traditional meeting is in traditional meetings, the leader leads and calls on people. In Zoom meetings, the leader leads and then critiques everybody's share. And I was at a meeting and I don't stay at meetings like that because I'm not going to support when I see 9 people in a room that are hurting and some asshole that's leading is sharing 27 minutes out of an hour. I'm not going to support it. Anyway, asshole stands for alcoholics, sharing, sober, helpful, odd life experiences. And so I go to meetings so I can hear those odd life experiences. So when they happened to me, I knew I could stay sober. When my partner died, I knew I could stay sober. When my son died, I knew I could stay sober. Yeah, there were people that used it as an excuse. But the only reason I ever drank is when I got the truth of the first step. I drink because I'm an alcoholic. That's I had a lot of excuses for my drinking. But when I got honest with myself that I drink because I'm an alcoholic, I never had to drink again. And for me, that means I go to a meeting and hear other assholes share their odd life experiences. So thank you for your shares today. And I am rereading your book 2 pages at a time instead of studying it with other people, and it makes a lot more sense. I'm 84. I've never exercised. I've never eaten right. I don't meditate. And anytime I get in a meeting that chants, I put up my asshole sign. Thanks again.
Thanks for being such an important asshole here, Arlene. I appreciate it. Over to Chile, John.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Jeffrey. My question is around spirituality. Obviously, to Bill Wilson, Bill W. is very crucial in his mind that spirituality be part of recovery. And then he went on to take LSD a number of times and was pretty convinced, as far as I understand it, that that was a good way to have a spiritual experience. So I can relate to that. Having taken LSD and ecstasy and other drugs. So I was just wondering, and because I've been struggling with this, I'm only, in 104 days here, but what is your definition of spirit and your definition of spirituality?
It's a good question. It's a state of mind. It's an emotional, mental state for me. So it's generally, for me, it's feeling very anchored to the present moment, and connected to something bigger, and not so closely identified with my thoughts, with my thinking brain. That's what it is for me. And but it's a feeling, and it's an experience. I still do believe that it is a human experience, based in the brain, but it's a profound experience. And but generally, what most people who talk about spiritual experiences seem to have in common is that there's a connection to something greater. There's a real feeling of connectedness to the present moment, and a lack of being swept up in thought. Some sort of awareness of our consciousness outside of just thinking and moving from one thing to the next on autopilot, if that makes sense. That's the best way I can think to describe it. In terms of spirit, I don't believe in a spirit. I still believe that's more of a state of mind, but I don't know. And I'm okay not knowing. When I say I don't believe something, I'm not saying I believe it's non-existent, right? Like I wouldn't consider myself an anti-deist, right? Like I'm not going around telling people like, God's not real, right? Hey, there's no such thing as God. I don't know. I haven't seen evidence for the type of God that's been presented to me in many different forms, in an external God that is intervening in our lives. I haven't seen evidence for it, and I don't believe in that. Do I know 100% for certain that? Can I go around and say that's definitely not there? No, but so that's where I'm coming from when I say I don't believe something. It's a lack of belief, not a belief in the absence of it.
Thanks for the question, and great answer. Glad we recorded it. Going to listen again. Judy.
Hi, I'm Judy, and I'm a cannabis addict and an alcoholic. I love your book, and I love your 12 steps. I wrote my own 12 steps because I really needed to. I love words, and I work with words, and I switched them to first person, and I say, I believe that I have the power to stop self-destructive cycles of dependence on drugs and alcohol. And for 6 and 7, I said, I will accept responsibility for my attitudes and behavior. And for 7, I am working to let go of my non-productive coping skills and to cultivate healthy character traits through consistent positive behavior. So you can see I stole a lot from you. And also, I'd like to share that my higher power, my HP, is healing process. And I am 3 years down the road. I'm progressing. And I'm so grateful to all the different groups I've attended, and some most faithfully. I was not able to continue with Marijuana Anonymous because they were so religious. And I would just feel myself arguing because I'm as atheist as one can get. I'm a lapsed Unitarian. You can't get more atheist than that. It was great for me while I was raising my children to have that social. Anyway, I wanted to also, you said fake it till you make it is really practice. And I am practicing day after day. It's the practice that helps me change. And I am also an asshole and need to change. But rather than saying fake it till you make it, that sounds like I'm being disingenuous. I always say act as if. So let's see. Be impeccable with my words, and is it true? And don't take it personally. Boy, do I take it personally. And I have had to leave some groups because I felt judged. And I've had to leave some relationships because I felt judged. So this is such a great place to be, in a safe place. And also, it's an hour or 90 minutes where I can focus on being right here, right now. And I don't ruminate about the past or worry about the future. I'm just right here. And thank you all for being here too, especially you, Jeffrey Munn and Josie.
Thanks, Judy. Two heads are better than one. Carol and Catherine.
Hi, I'm Catherine, and I'm grateful to be sober today. Jeffrey, I want to thank you for your time today spent with us. I have read your whole book, and I'm very glad that I did. I have only been in secular for probably 6 to 8 months, and it was the first book that I read when I came into secular, and it just really resonated with me, and I appreciate it. Joe and John, I really thank you for your time in bringing this this workshop about and spending the time with us and giving us an opportunity to get to know Jeffrey better. And Jeffrey, I look forward to receiving your workbook. I just sent you an email a few minutes ago. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that, you know, there's nothing really that can be proven, and including in mathematics. There are some things that can't be proven in mathematics, such as pi. Pi is not, nobody knows whether it's an infinitely long number or not. So anyway, good to have you here. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks so much. And there's a lot of people who are responsible for this meeting happening every month. A committee of hard workers. But thank you. Glad you appreciate it. Temple.
Hey everybody, my name's Temple. I'm a drunk. Thank you so much for hosting the meeting today, and Jeffrey for being here. Sort of a controversial statement. I'm grateful the pandemic happened because I live in rural Vermont, and there's not a lot of free thinker meetings. There's a lot of practical traditional AA, which is where I got my start, and had trouble with step 2, step 3, step 6, step 7, step 11. That's a few, isn't it? Anyway, pandemic happened, everything moves online, and I discovered secular AA. You know, so I was always rereading Appendix 2. And along the way, I discovered Jeffrey's book, Staying Sober Without God. And what a boon to my recovery, but also the people that I'm recovery partners with. I've been working with your book, and then also Cassie Jewell's workbook, and guiding people through the steps, and just blown away, honestly, by the process, particularly 6 and 7, which I had a difficult time with in traditional AA. And as you pointed out, it's a paragraph and a half. And I think fundamentally, the two most important steps flat out for personal growth, development, personal change. And I think you really just nailed it with that. So thank you very much for that. The only thing, and I'm so excited to hear that you've got a rough draft coming out. I sent my email. So working with people, the step one that using in the workbook from Cassie, based on your step one, is a little intimidating. I remember being in rehab and just looking up at the steps, like, am I powerless? Is my life unmanageable? I can nod my head at that. But I think in Cassie's workbook, there's something like 14 or 16 questions for, the newcomer coming in. It's like one thing to admit you're an addict. Another thing is like, well, here's some homework. You have to answer all these questions about how your life, you're stuck in this self-destructive cycle, which, having worked with several people using that, it's phenomenal the amount of information that I have gained and learned about the self-destructive process. So I am just over the moon grateful to have had the opportunity to use that. And I'm really excited to see your workbook. So just thank you a lot. Appreciate it and appreciate you. Cheers.
Thanks, Temple. Tim. There we go.
Yeah, I'm Tim, a recovering alcoholic. One of the things you said early on that I found interesting was that you started your recovery journey with a therapist, and you had a therapist that basically gave you kind of a version of the Nike "Just Do It" commercial. It's like, if you understand this difficulty, why don't you just stop? Sounds to me like the therapist needed a bit more training. And so you changed therapist. I guess my question centers around, did you find your recovery mainly in therapy or through the AA meetings? And how do you recommend people judge whether, once they have maybe done AA and found some recovery, as to whether they maybe need to do further therapy? I thought the DSM had a wonderful set of questions in defining alcohol use disorder, which are pretty helpful to outline whether you might need help with that issue. But how do you make similar judgments with regards to ADHD or obsessive compulsive behavior as to whether someone should seek therapy beyond what they're achieving in AA? Thanks.
Great question. I feel like I got the majority of my recovery from therapy and from group therapy, specifically a group of people in recovery, but it was led by a therapist. So it was kind of both. It was a lot of holding each other accountable, a lot of very direct, questioning and challenging each other. That's where I really felt like I got the majority of my recovery. Meetings helped, but what helped me the most in the meetings was developing relationships with people that, now are my people, and they're my recovery people, and I feel connected to them, and I feel part of a recovery community, which has a big impact on, how I feel about the option to drink and use. I think if I felt alone and not connected, it would seem like much more of an option to me. I think people are very prone to, be like the people they hang out with and pick up characteristics of the people they spend time with. And so that's been really helpful for me in terms of, knowing when outside help is necessary. I think it's just important. I talk a lot about self-reflection. I'm pretty sure I talk about it in my original book, but it's mentioned quite a few more times in the workbook. Just having some sort of daily self-reflection and checking on yourself, and what did I do today? how was I functioning today? Where did I get, where did I act outside of my values? And, if you're finding that you're stuck somewhere, there's something that doesn't seem to be getting better, or there's some aspect of functioning that continues to be lacking, it may be a sign that there's something else that needs to be addressed. And that's when I would encourage people to go to therapy. Also, though, I'm biased, and I think everybody should be in therapy all the time. I think it's just such an important thing to have somebody with training, prefer a good therapist, of course. And there's a lot of bad therapists out there, but someone who's, trained, has a very strict boundary where you're not friends with them, and they're willing to, call you on your stuff, and can spot patterns that maybe a sponsor or someone else wouldn't be able to. So I think everybody can benefit from it, but if there's a sign that something else is going on, I have both ADHD and OCD, and I'm on medication, and I need medication. I have tried not being on medication for my OCD, and I have not found, is it possible that I don't need medication? Maybe, but I have not yet found something that works without it. So, so I'm big on people finding what works for them, whether that includes, outside help, medication, whatever. Just, obviously talk to your doctor about it, a good doctor, which you may need to shop around for, but I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for the question. And thanks, Jeffrey. Judy. First time you heard that today?
Actually, it's true. It is the first time I heard it today. Thank you, Joey. Hi, I'm Judy, and I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I'm really appreciating this workshop. Thank you very much, Jeffrey. I am one of those good therapists, not the other kind. And I was a therapist before I got into my first 12-step program 47 years ago. So I had a lot of intellectual knowledge, but I didn't know how to surrender. And that's been the big thing for me, but I've not surrendered to any higher power. I wear a t-shirt that says, trust the universe, whatever that is. And I don't really care. I remember once a Buddhist monk said to me, begin at once and do your best. And that's kind of worked for me. All of the debate is about not getting started. Begin at once and do your best. It's very simple. So, and I would like to talk to you a lot, Jeffrey, about this, but I do want to ask you this here on the show, if that's what it is. I am also a well-published author in recovery field, mostly for overeaters. And I spent about 25 years, radio, television, traveling, blah, 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 talking the talk. And this was in the early days, in the 80s it started. And OA was my primary program, Overeaters Anonymous. And I had a conflict I want to ask you about. And that was that there were some people in OA who set me up as a goddess and just adored everything I had to say. And then there were other people who were angry at me because they thought, I was selling 12-step or showing off, or I just couldn't win, and I kept working really hard to just be my own person at the meetings. I don't want to talk about the work I do. I just want to be here for my own. And by the way, my sponsor has been very helpful in helping me with two-way prayer. And I really like that because we're trusting the energy between us for answers. So I just want to say that about prayer. But anyway, have you experienced that struggle of how do you put on the right hat? I don't want to say without getting judged, because you're going to get judged either way, but just to clearly know my intentions and my audience, let's say. It's a careful tightrope. I feel I've mastered it now because I'm pretty much out of the field, just doing my writing, and very grateful. But just wonder what you have to say about that.
That's a great question. I don't know if I'm any good at it, honestly, because I'm not that big. My book does okay. I'm by no means, you probably had a lot more readers and sales and all that than I did. But I think a big part of it is just being honest with myself. Like I can listen to people tell me, that I'm full of crap, or that I'm, making a profit off of other people's suffering, or whatever. As long as I'm, feeling confident that I'm acting with integrity, and I'm, and I'm clear on the reasons that I'm doing things, and from the time I wrote the book, I was always pretty honest with myself, I think, about like, I'm doing this because I think it's an important book. I want to help people, and I'd love some passive income. Like that's, I mean, it's all, it's of course part of it. So I'm honest with myself about that. And I'm not, but I'm also not trying to BS people to make, it's important for me to be honest and to be real and to have integrity. And it'd be great if that also makes some money. So I feel like, as long as I'm acting in integrity, if someone criticizes me, I'm going to be able to respond to it. It's not gonna hurt me as much, because they're not pointing out something that like I know deep down, but I'm hiding from myself. I feel like that's when, people get the most defensive, is when, you're pointing out something that they don't want to believe themselves. And that's true for me. If someone points out something and I know deep down that it's true, I'm much more likely to get rattled by it. And so I try to not have any of that. So if someone comes to me and they're like, you're just making a profit off of recovery. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, partially, sure. Yeah, that's happening.
A lot of people need.
But I also think that's part of just living in this world. People need to make a living, and, I'd rather make a living that also helps people than, selling snake oil.
Thank you.
Roger.
I do have to leave at 1. I don't know if this is officially ending at 1, but
we're going to try to have it all wrapped up by then, by all means.
My 6-year-old is downstairs, and I'm pretty sure she's still alive, but I think it's my responsibility to make sure.
Hi, I'm Roger, and I'm a person in recovery. Just real quick, a couple of things. First, I want to thank John and Kat for covering our back on this meeting. I want to thank you both very much for having the meeting. I don't want to thank Joe anymore. Joe has been thanked enough for so much. Enough with this thanking the Joe, okay? Forget it. Enough. Okay, enough. All right. Now, the other thing is, your answer kind of hurt me before. You are not a perfect human being, Jeff. I mean, I understand that, okay? You have not written the perfect recovery book. No, you have not, okay? But I've noticed in secular meetings, if there's a choice between using a word that has 8 syllables versus 3 syllables, we're going to choose the 8-syllable word for some reason all the freaking time. And we're going to get into these wonderful intellectual conversations about this and that. And I've been sober for about 36 years. And I was a licensed alcohol and drug counselor for about 8 of those years. And as I look back on my life now, if I was hiring back then, I would not have hired myself back then, but I did it anyway. But the point was, we're all just trying to get there the best we can, okay? And if your book helps some people, great. If Martha's book helps, great. If Gorski's book helps, if Rader's book helps, great. Ease up. Rule 62, come on. We're not going to always get this right, folks. I'm much more into what, where, when, and how than I am into the concept of why and this and that. I just found your book refreshing. I like the fact you take the character traits that are negative, you turn them into positive, and I spend my day trying to develop positive traits about myself. You just don't hear that at a traditional meeting. At a traditional meeting, we want to talk about your sins and that thing, blah, blah. I'm working with a guy this morning, and we did his 4th and 5th step, and I said, now, do you have your card that says, here is the shit that I want to work on today that you're going to become? And he's so ingrained in tradition. He goes, no, I don't. I said, well, give yourself a break. Work on something positive today. You know, you want to be happy, try to be happy today. Don't worry about whatever. So I really enjoyed how you turned that and twisted that around. That helped me a lot. But in any event, I know this comes as a shocking proof. You're not perfect, but someday you might be. You just got to keep coming back. And I enjoy your stuff about having a recovery community. I really appreciate that. If you've developed it and you've nurtured it, it's going to be a support for you. So hang in there, and I appreciate you being here today. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, Roger. Kevin. Let's try that again.
Yeah. Kevin, got issues. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for being here. Love your book. My favorite line in the secular literature is, in your step one about empowerment. I really took that to heart. Apologies to Joe. Of course, that's the best book. But anyway, for the we go to a neurodiversity meeting, which starts in about 2 minutes. But I've kind of self-diagnosed myself as being autistic on some level. But do you subscribe to that theory of alcoholism being an attachment disorder? And if so, how much? And then the third question, I guess, was any suggestions for dealing with ongoing issues of guilt and shame? Thanks.
Those are some big questions. Okay, so yeah, I don't know if alcoholism is caused. I wouldn't, that would be a really bold statement to make. What I will say is it's very rare for me to meet somebody with addiction problems that doesn't have attachment issues of some sort. I don't know if I'd say they all have a full-blown attachment disorder. But for the most part, there's some attachment stuff there for sure. And at the very least, there's some pretty significant emotional regulation stuff, either very intense emotions or poor emotional regulation skills, or both. So there's that. And the second question is escaping me right now. The second question was, can you remind me? Should have written it down.
It was guilt and shame.
Guilt and shame. Oh man, I am still very shame-based. I have a lot of, it's very easy for me to feel shame and guilt when someone tells me, I did something wrong. Usually a loved one or something tells me I did something wrong. What I hear is, you're unlovable. I don't love you anymore. So I have a lot of guilt and shame issues, and what's helped the most is talking about it, especially the shame stuff, talking about it, and also developing relationships with people where you can clarify stuff like that. If you're feeling ashamed, if you're feeling that someone else is judging you, being able to say, hey, I'm feeling judged. Is this accurate? But yeah, guilt and shame is a huge, whether it's just inherent shame, toxic shame that you were born with, that was kind of instilled by your parents or whoever, growing up, or whether it's shame over a specific incident that changes things. So there's a lot to talk about there. There's good books on it. And I couldn't get into all of that, but talking about it and assertive communication with the people you're in a relationship with is a good start.
Thank you very much.